तमाम साथियों को या अली मदद. Thank you for joining us.
Ya Ali Madad. Ya Ali Madad.
Ya Ali Madad. Thank you for joining us this Sunday morning. Inshallah, in a minute or two, we will start with the lecture on Eid Ghadir. But before we do that, we like to thank everyone who has been sending us the comments, feedback, and questions. And today's class is actually driven from one of the questions that was sent about 3 weeks ago in one of the Sunday morning session. And inshallah, Rashida Sahaba will join us in a minute or two and we will start the session. If you do have any comments today or question, share your comments and question on the chat or on the WhatsApp group. And inshallah, at the end of the session, we will try to ask as many questions as possible, time given. And if not, we will send it to her and she will reply back either in writing or in next session, inshallah ta'ala. So let me check on Rashia Sahaba, and if not, then we will have a Ginan part or something. Yali Madad Rashida Sahaba.
Here I have the introduction.
May I ask everyone to mute their phone, please? And Rashida Sahaba is with us. Welcome, Rashida Sahaba. Yali Madad.
Mawla Ali Madad, thank you for the welcome. Would you like me to start straight away?
Ji Rashida Sahaba, thank you.
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And Ya Ali Madad to everybody who is online. As Aziz Bhai has just mentioned, we had a question about 3 weeks ago, as he said. And the question was that we as Ismaili and other Shias, we observe and believe in the event of Ghadir Khumm, but other sects of Islam are completely blind to it. And matter of fact, they completely deny this event has ever taken place. And whoever asked this question wanted me to shed some light on this. So we have to start first by analyzing some of the points in that question. You all know, this is basic knowledge, that in Islam we have two major groups, the Sunni and the Shia. The Sunni are bigger in numbers, they are the majority, and amongst them it is not a uniform picture. You know, I think one thing which we have to really bear in mind is that amongst the Sunni Muslim brothers and sisters, there is a tremendous diversity of opinions, views, etc. For instance, it's extremely well known that amongst them, the Sunni majority, there are those Sunnis who really love Maulana Ali, and they have a special name, they are called Tafsilis. And there is also a group amongst them who really hate Maulana Ali, and there is a name for them which is Nasibi. So we must not treat everybody like a monolithic group. We should be aware that there is diversity. But obviously, in a lecture of 40 odd minutes, we have to concentrate on some common things. So within the Sunnis, those who completely deny the event of Ghadir Khumm, there is not much to say about them. They simply deny that it happened, okay? But the group that says that it did take place, and for that, I want to give you a reference, which is Ahmad ibn Hanbal. who is also a collector of hadith. You see, unfortunately, our Sunni brothers and sisters give more importance to the hadith collection of Bukhari. Whereas if they were to use the other five, there are six books of hadith, collections of hadith, and if they were to use Ahmad ibn Hanbal, then he has like a dozen narrations about Ghadir Khumm. So he is a Sunni, but he has a dozen narrations. But of course his interpretation will be different. And you, when Aziz Bhai asked me to deliver this lecture, I sent him a list of 6 references that should be collected. And one of those references, if I remember, was about no, maybe not. Maybe I've got it wrong. What I wanted to point out to you is that where the Sunnis say there is a different interpretation, it is understood that they have a difference of opinion on the word Mawla. Mawla. Keep that in your mind, because when I come to the Shia interpretation, we will look at that ayat. Yes, and that's what I meant to say, is that for that one ayat, which is Surah 33, ayat 6, I asked your group, the researchers who are very active, to find at least 5 different English translations of that verse. It's very crucial. That verse is extremely crucial. So now, let us take what the Sunni interpretation is. So the Sunni interpretation is that Maulana Ali had been sent on a mission to Yemen, and he had come back very successful, and then he had a lot of ganimat, booty, the spoils of war, and when he distributed it, and he was very, very just, of course there were people who were dissatisfied with what they got. And therefore they started criticizing Maulana Ali very bitterly. And so the Sunnis say that when Prophet Muhammad said, "He whose Mawla I am, Ali is his Mawla," he meant that the word Mawla, he meant that, Ali is my favorite, Ali is my kinsman, I love Ali, Ali is very good, etc., etc. That Prophet was just simply trying to pour water over the dissatisfaction which the people had felt. Okay, so this is what their interpretation is. Now, having made the point that there are those who accept it but have a different interpretation, and then there are those who deny it, and that there is not a monolithic way of thinking amongst our Sunni brothers and sisters, let's go on to the Shia, the minority. Who? Before I go to the Shia, I want to make this one very important point for anybody who is interested in the study of Islam. One of the things which I asked to find as a reference is an article on Ghadir Khumm in the Encyclopedia of Islam 2. Why is it called EI2? Because there is also an Encyclopedia of Islam number 1. And this number 1 did not mention Ghadir Khumm at all. But number 2 has an article by an Italian scholar, and I'm not sure if it is a male or a female. I really am not even too sure of the author's name, but it's an Italian name. And he or she says, he actually quotes Ahmad ibn Hanbal in that article. That's why I remember to tell you that. So, why did Encyclopedia Islam number 2 have an article on Ghadir Khumm and number 1 didn't? The answer is that up to 1979, when the Iranians, with their long-standing difficulties and differences with the United States, in 1979, when they arrested some American people, it is only at that time that the Western world became aware that there is such a group as Shia amongst the Muslims. 1979, it's not too far distant. Up to 1979, they had only read Sunni sources. Europe's contact was greatest with Turkey, and Turkey has always been a Sunni country. And therefore, all the literature, all the ideas, all the concepts were from a Sunni worldview, from a Sunni viewpoint. And for people to now realize that there is such a group as Shia, it's a new thing. And this is where I think when Maulana Hafiz Imam says that, the whole Jamaat is my ambassadors, they are my dais, I think one of the things is that he's asking us to represent the Shia sect of Islam in our discussions with people, because people do not really know about the Shia sect. So now what do the Shia say? The Shia say that the Prophet had publicly announced that he would be doing his farewell pilgrimage, his final, last pilgrimage to Makkah. And therefore thousands of people from all over Arabia, Muslims, they accompanied him to Makkah. And he performed his Hajj in Makkah, and then he was traveling back to Medina, and he received the ayat which we recite in our third part of the dua. He received that ayat. Now the Sunni version is that he received this ayat in Arafat, which is during the Hajj rites and ceremonies. The Shia point is that he received it on his way back, and he was near a place called Ghadir Khumm. Ghadir means a pond, and Khumm is the name of the place. There is a small oasis there where the animals can be watered, etc. So the Prophet took this revelation very seriously, because it is quite a warning to the Prophet. It ends by saying, and Allah will protect you from the people. So he stopped there. He had a stage made of camel saddles, and he sent messengers to those who had gone forward to call them back, and messengers to those who were straggling behind to call them, so that they were all gather. And then he got onto the stage of camel saddles, and he first and foremost asked a question. Now you know that in Islam everything is done 3 times to make sure that people are certain of their answers or certain of their intentions. So what was his question? His question is based on this surah which I gave you in my reference, 33:6. The ayat reads, An-Nabiyyu awla. I've emphasized the word awla. An-Nabiyyu awla bil mu'minina min anfusihim. And then وَأَزْوَاجُهُ ummahatuhum. Right? I asked you to look at 5 different translations, because I am quite certain that none of them will be satisfactory. This word awla, which is the root, the same root as the word mawla. The translation should be, God is saying to the Muslims, to whoever reads the Quran, Muslim or not, is saying that the Prophet has a greater right, the Prophet has a greater right over the souls of the mu'mineen. So this is what the Prophet asked at Ghadir Khumm 3 times. Do I not have a greater right over your souls than you yourselves? They said yes. O the Prophet of Allah. He repeated it again, do I not have a greater right over your souls than you yourselves? They said yes. And a third time. And then he said, and then only he said, he whose Mawla I am, Ali is his Mawla. Now, you know, when we have wazis or write-ups, this background is not explained to the Jamaat because whoever prepares the write-ups may not necessarily know about this ayat in the Quran, 33:6. So, having established that he had a greater right over the people's souls, and that he was using the word Mawla in that sense, then the Prophet announced, Man kuntu Mawlahu fahaza Aliyun Mawlahu. He whose Mawla I am, Ali is his Mawla. So, you see, there can be no interpretation of the word Mawla except that Maulana Ali was in the same position as the Holy Prophet vis-a-vis the Ummah. The Sunni interpretation cannot be taken seriously. Yes, the word Mawla, like many words in Arabic, has many, many meanings, including a completely opposite meaning. The word Mawla can mean master, it can also mean slave. But obviously, the Prophet was not saying that Ali is your slave. He himself was not a slave of the people, he was their master because he had a greater right over the people. So this is a very important point which is not known in the Jamaat. And this is something which we can definitely, using this ayat, explain to the Jamaat. Because the most important ahadiths of the Prophet are those which are based on the Quran. They are based on the Quran. Okay, having said that, having raised, he had already called Hazrat Ali onto the stage, he had raised the hand of Hazrat Ali and he had declared this, then the Prophet did something else. The other hadith, which our Jamaat does know. I am leaving behind me two weighty, significant things. The Book of Allah and my progeny. Now there again, you see, Kitabullah wa itrati. So itrati can also be mistranslated. And the Sunni version is that the Prophet said, I am leaving behind two things, the Book of Allah and my sunnat. Now, Shia scholars will tell you that the Prophet's sunnat was not different from the Quran. So why do we need both? We don't really need both. And if you take the word sunnat at its face value, then the most important sunnat was what the Prophet had just already declared, Man kuntu mawlahu fahaza aliyun mawlahu. So we Shia say that this word should be itrati. And again, that is based on the Quran. Surah 3, ayat 33-34, that Allah has chosen Adam and Noah and the family of Abraham and the family of Imran above all his creatures. They are descendants one of the other. And many, many other Quranic ayats which support this point. All right. Now, having said that, now the second hadith, the Prophet then raises his hands in prayer. And this prayer is never mentioned in our Jamaati write-ups. It is such an important Prophet prayer. He prayed, O Allah, be the friend of those who are the friend of Ali, and be the enemy of those who are Ali's enemies, and help those who help Ali, and abandon those who abandon Ali. And then the final sentence, وَأَدْرِ الْحَقَّ مَاءُ حَيْسُدَى, which means, and O Allah, turn the haqq, the truth, in the direction in which Ali turns. I mean, just think about that phrase. The Prophet did not say that Ali would turn in the direction of Haqq. The Prophet said that Haqq would turn in the direction in which Ali turns. It's really mind-blowing. You know, we should reflect on this. I think this would be a very, very high ibadah because it explains who the Imam really is. Whatever he does, whatever he says is Haqq. And that's where Farman Bardari and keeping our bayah becomes so important, and that this is the real recognition of the Imam. Now, this is what the Shias have said. And then in the Shia history, there is, Umar congratulating Hazrat Ali, Bakkan, ya Ali, you have become the Mawla of the Mu'mineen, etc., etc. There is the poetry of Hassan ibn Sabit about it, all this. But this is in the Shia interpretation of history. Right? Now, what I would suggest is therefore, we need to take a note very much of this third part ayat which we recite in our dua every day, 3 times. Yeah? Ya ayyuhal rasulu balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik wa illam tafal fama balagta risalatahu wallahu ya'simuka minan nas. Now I don't know whether all of you know the English translation and whether any of you have wondered about this ayat. Because in English it comes out as, oh, Prophet, delivered to the people what has been revealed to you, and if you would not do so, you have not delivered his message, and Allah will protect you from the people. Now, whether you take the Sunni interpretation that this was revealed at Arafat during the Hajj ceremonies, or you take the Shia interpretation that it was revealed at Ghadir Khumm on the way back to Medina after the Hajj, the point is, this ayah, it doesn't make sense because already the Prophet, throughout his mission lasted from 40 years of age to 63 when he passed away. So he had been delivering Allah's message, the revelations, the wahi, constantly throughout 22 and a half years. Day or night, in Makkah or Medina, during peacetime or during wartime, he was constantly giving the Ummah the message that was. So why does God say that, if you don't deliver this message, it is as though you have not delivered the message? And the answer is that there is something missing here. And the missing bit is, we have found it in a Sunni source. A very important Sunni scholar by the name of Jalaluddin Suyuti, you can tell from his name that he is an Egyptian, so Arabic is his first language, mother tongue. He writes in his Tafsir Duri Mansur in Arabic that during the time of the Prophet, this ayat was recited like this. Ya ayyuhal rasulu balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik anna aliyal mawla al mu'minin wa illam tafil ma balagta risalatuhu wallahu ya'simuka minan nas. A whole phrase, anna aliyun mawla al mu'minin, is missing. In the time of the Prophet, it was recited with this phrase. So what was this message? That indeed Ali is the Mawla of the Mu'mineen. And that's exactly what the Prophet therefore said at Ghadir Khumm. Such an important point. Now, somebody might say, Jalaluddin Suyuti, there's a lot of literature on the Quran, lots of tafsirs in the 1400 years. as Imam himself has referred to them. That thousands of tafsirs have been written. And it's a very big job to research into all these. Fortunately, this Tafsir Mansur has been translated into Urdu. And 3-4 years ago when we were in Karachi, Fakir Sahib went through it, particularly this point, and it has been translated correctly. Even the Urdu translation tells you, and that is a page which I have scanned and sent to Aziz Bhai, that you should all make sure that this is shared in the Jamaat. And the interesting part is that Jalaluddin Suyuti is not in favor of Ismailis, because he has actually written a book called Khulafa in Islam, the Caliphs of Islam. He doesn't even mention our Fatimid Imams. He's not a friend of the Ismailis, but he's a scholar, and he's actually saying that a whole phrase is missing from this third, verse which we recite in the third part of our Dua, Surah 5, Ayat 67. And this is very important for us to know such facts. It's the times are gone when we can just enjoy a story about Ghadir Khumm. We need more information. We need more references so that we, at least ourselves, have complete conviction. And if ever we get a chance to have a discussion with other friends amongst the Sunni Muslims, we can put our point of view to them, that this is the case. Now, some of you might be wondering, is it true that things have been taken out of the Quran? The answer is yes. It is extremely well known that the Quran has not been added to. It has never been, in the Quran itself, God challenges the enemies of the Prophet, and he says that if you, the enemies of the Prophet and jinn together, produce 10 chapters of this if you can. And if you can't produce 10 chapters, try and produce one only. You will not be able to do it. So nobody has been able to add to the Quran, but they have certainly taken out things. For instance, we once, Fakir Sahib and I attended the lecture of an Iranian professor from Paris. His name is Professor Amir Moezi. And he made the point that not only have the names of the Ahl Bayt, the Prophet's family, the Panchtan Pak, been removed from the Quran, even the names of the enemies of the Panchtan Pak have been removed. And a classic example of that is in Surah Tahrim. Surah Tahrim, the verses where the two wives of the Prophet are being criticized by God, actually Bukhari himself, the great respected scholar of Sunni Islam, he himself says that those two women are Aisha and Hafsa, but their names no longer appear in the Quran. So we need to know this type of things. Now, finally, having given you the Shia interpretation, now we have to look at more than history. Of course, we have looked at the Quran as well here, but Hadith, we need to look at Hadith as well. For that, I had given the reference from Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah's memoirs, the chapter, The Islamic Concept in My Role as Imam, and on page 178 in the English publication, Maulana Sultan Shah says, Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, the husband of his beloved and only surviving child, Fatima, his first convert, his bold champion in many a war, whom the Prophet in his lifetime said would be to him as Aaron was to Moses, his brother and right-hand man, in the veins of whose descendants the Prophet's own blood would flow, appeared destined to be that true successor, and such had been the general expectation of Islam. In the next sentence is also very important. The Shias have therefore always held that after the Prophet's death, divine power, guidance, and leadership manifested themselves in Hazrat Ali as the first Imam or spiritual chief of the devout. So you notice here, this whole paragraph is about Maulana Ali. Maulana Sultan Shah doesn't mention Ghadir, but he mentions the very important hadith which is in all Sunni collections, the hadith of Mamasilat Haruni, the sameness, the similarity to Harun. And this hadith is very important, that the Prophet said, "O Ali, you are to me as Harun was to Musa, except there will be no prophet after me." This is a very important hadith. And this hadith, you will find several versions of it in our book, the Holy Ahl al-Bayt in the Prophetic Traditions, which Hafiz Sahib identified all the hadiths, and then I put them under several headings. And this book has been in the market. It's on our Ismaili Literature website. This book only quotes hadith from Sunni sources. Why? Because the Shias are going to say these good things anyway. So we didn't bother with the Shia version. Hafiz Sahib only chose Sunni sources, so that we realize that, it's not a monolithic situation out there. They don't all think uniformly. And in fact, they themselves may be unaware. I would like to share with you, although the time is a problem, that, many years ago, an Ismaili lady in London approached me and said she had been married to a Sunni for 25 years, 3 daughters by him. She said, he's a wonderful person, but there's one thing wrong with him. He's always criticizing the Ismailis. So I gave her 2 books. The Book of Healing by Allama Nasiruddin Nasirunzai, and this book of Hadith. I told her, keep it on his bedside, don't say anything. 3-4 months later, I met her again. I asked her, what is your situation? She said, he has stopped criticizing the Ismailis by reading those books. So these books are very important. And in this one, I particularly mentioned the circular diagram, which is at the beginning of the book, because this diagram was constructed by Allama Sahib, in which every Quranic ayah, which refers to both Maulana Ali and to Hazrat Harun, are placed together. And one of them is particularly that how is the Maulana Ali the Khalifa or the successor of Prophet Muhammad, just as Harun was the successor of Hazrat Musa. This is ayat 7, 142. Surah 7, 142. And the key word in this ayat in Arabic is Wakala Musa li akihi, and Musa said to his brother Harun, Aklufuni, he called me, and take my place among the people. Aklufuni, which comes from the word Khalifa, same root. Take my place with the community. Why? Because Hazrat Musa was going to go to Mount Sinai. And that whole episode is so important, because one day some Sunni scholars challenged our great Da'i Sayyidina Hamiduddin Kirmani during the Fatimid times. And they said what people say nowadays. They said, how can we accept that so many thousands of people who heard the Prophet declare Hazrat Ali's succession, and then they should all turn away from it? So Sayyidina Kirmani quietly replied, did not Hazrat Musa appoint Hazrat Harun in his place before he went to Mount Sinai? And what happened behind? Everybody turned away from Hazrat Harun and they listened to Samiri. This is where knowledge of history, knowledge of the Quran, knowledge of Hadith can really help us to be very clear. Now, having brought in that Hadith, I also want to mention that there is a book which I had forgotten and I only remembered it today. There's a book by a German scholar called Wilfred Madelung called The Succession to Muhammad, a study of the early caliphate. This book is worth reading. When I read it, I read the introduction and I thought I was reading Allama Sahib's Recognition of Imam book. There is so much similarity between what he says. In other words, the gist of what he says is that there is no question about who Prophet Muhammad appointed as his successor. It was definitely Ali. Whether you look at history, whether you look at hadith, whether you look at the Quran, no matter where you look, you will only find this. And there, we should look at the previous history of religion. What about Hazrat Adam? Did he have his own blood Khalifa? Yes. He had Hazrat Shis. What about Hazrat Nuh? Yes, he had Hazrat Sam. What about Hazrat Ibrahim? Very famously known, it was Hazrat Ismail. Then Musa, Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Harun, Hazrat Isa and Hazrat Shamun Safa, and finally Hazrat Nabi Muhammad and Hazrat Ali, which is why the Prophet had said, "Oh Ali, you were hidden with all the prophets before me, but now with me you have become manifest." So there is plenty of, and here comes this esoteric concept, that why should there always be a Natik and an Asas? Because that is a pair, and it is a Quranic principle that God has created everything in pairs. So you have Hazrat Adam, and his pair is Hazrat Shis, and so on down the line to Hazrat Muhammad and Ali. And that's why the Prophet said, "Oh Ali, you and I are the parents of the Ummah." I.e., Prophet was the spiritual father and Hazrat Ali was the spiritual mother. Because without a spiritual father and a spiritual mother, you cannot have spiritual procreation, just as you cannot have physical procreation without a physical father and a physical mother. This is simple logic as well. It is corroborated by the history of religion. It is corroborated by the Quran, by other scriptures, by hadith, and by sheer logic that there should be a successor to the Prophet. Only the other day, discussing in the London group, I said to people, even the enemies of Islam accept that the Holy Prophet Muhammad in 23 years completely changed the society of Arabia. He brought about such an enormous social revolution. He stopped the Arabs from committing child infanticide, burying their daughters in the desert sand. He ensured the rights of women. He brought a whole code of conduct about home life, social life, life during war, etc. He gave the constitution of Medina, in which everybody, all religions' rights were. He did so much, so much. You know, there are Western scholars who say that he has, he's the greatest of the greatest, including your own country, United States, have a relief of him on the wall of your main building for justice. Do you think that having done all this, he would just leave it without a successor? That sheer logic says no. He would appoint somebody to carry on his good work. So I think that, I've completed my 40 minutes. So I will stop here and see if you have any questions. But I really sincerely urge you all to look at all the references which I give you, because the time for stories has gone. We need solid facts in order to convince people that there's more than one way of looking at history. One more point also. We should never rely only on history, because history has been very unkind. Take an example. Everybody talks about the 6 million Jews being destroyed during the Holocaust. How many people have you heard who talk about the 12 million Russians who lost their lives during the Second World War? No. We all know that, the British, when they write history, they talk about the mutiny of India. But when the Indians write their history, they say that was the War of Independence. We all know that the British called the Mau Mau in Kenya a rebellion. But the Kenyan historians do not say that. They say this was our fight for freedom from the imperialists. So, history has its benefits, but you have to be aware who is writing it. And you must have much more than history when it comes to religious principle. Thank you.
Subhanallah. We have very first question from Atlanta, I believe. He's asking, so you mentioned that there were 2 changes in our dua, and especially in part 3. So why do we think that the Imam omitted or left out the words for the Ali or the progeny in Ya Atiullah wa Atiur Rasul part? Can you explain that one more time, please?
Yes, certainly. I didn't mention more than one change in the dua. I only mentioned one change. And I didn't say that we have made the change or anybody has made the change. What I said was that according to a Sunni scholar, Jalaluddin Suyuti, this verse which we recite 3 times a day, Surah 5, Ayat 67, has a complete phrase missing, which is about Maulana Ali being the Mawla of the Mu'mineen, which is what the Prophet recited at Ghadir Khumm, because he received that ayat at that time, according to the Shia interpretation. So, that's what I said. Now, your question, why doesn't the Imam include it? We don't need it. We really don't need it, because there is so much else in the dua. Our ayats are taken from the Quran as they exist in Zahir. Okay? The Ismaili Tariqah has so many batini secrets, esoteric meanings. We don't necessarily share them with everybody. This is a historical thing. This is from the study of tafsirs, and many more such discoveries will be made in the future, right? You know that there is a popular saying in the Jamaat, and it's attributed to Maulana Sultan Shah, that 10 paras are missing from the Quran. It doesn't make any difference to us, because we believe that the Holy Quran in its origin is light, the Nur of God, and that Nur of God is in the Imam, who is وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. Right? So we don't really need, maybe when the Jamaat, if people like you share this information, when the Jamaat becomes more knowledgeable, Imam may go and include it in. But whether he includes it or not, it doesn't make too much of a difference. Okay, this is a scholarly point. It is to do with the world of research.
Thank you. So, correction in the question is it wasn't omitted, but it was not included. So, the second question is on same line, that we see our present Imam has made some changes in dua, which was in time of our previous Jama. Do we know why or what was the reason of the change?
No, we do not know the reasons. Our belief is that Imam knows best, and the fact that bringing the dua in Arabic to make it a global dua for the entire global Jamaat. Prior to the Arabic dua, every culture was reciting in their own language. You know that, yeah? The Indians in Gujarati, Iran, Persian, Central Asia, Persian, etc., etc. So the Imam brought in the Arabic dua to globalize our prayer. And of course, being a global prayer, where would its base or foundation be? It would be in the Holy Quran. Therefore, Surah Al-Fatiha, and then the two ayats in part 2, part 3, part 4, the Bayah, the ayat of Bayah, the ayat of Amanat, and then finally Surah Al-Ikhlas. Even if you know the inner meanings of what's in those ayats, it would be enough for us to understand what our tariqah is. One thing which we all need to understand in the Ismaili tariqah is that we don't, we believe in the Imam as embodied Nur. The Imam is Nur. The Quran which he possesses is in the form of Nur. And therefore, whatever the Imam's guidance, that is most important for us. And any changes he makes may be because of the circumstances in which we live, maybe because the Jamaat doesn't have the deep knowledge with which to explain things. There may be many reasons. I cannot speculate on what the Imam's reasons would be. In fact, I would be most hesitant to do that, because Imam is Akle Kul, and my Akal is only partial Akal. I cannot judge the perfect Akal. Okay? That is a position of a true Ismaili.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah. So, two more questions, and I believe you almost answered the second one. So, I will go ahead and read the question, and I believe you have already answered. So, if you want to add, go ahead. So, we believe there were like 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 places where changes were made. For example, Panchtan Pak was added in our 6th part dua, Yali Ya Muhammad and hand raising twice in our part 5th, and something was changed in our part 2. But I think you have already answered. Akle Kul, the Imam knows what is best and what needs to be added or changed in the dua. But if you want to add more to it, please go ahead.
Yeah, yes, I would simply add that the Jamaat should always be ready for more changes, because the Ismaili tariqah is a dynamic tariqah. Yeah, that's why we have a living Imam, so that we can live according to the time. And it is Imam's wish and desire that the Jamaat should have ease. This is the time of resurrection, is the time of Qiyamah. The Imam himself has said, the only constant is change. And the Ismaili Jamaat has always adapted to change because of the guidance of the Imam. Take one little example, for instance, now, that today with COVID, thousands of people have to change their careers. Well, it was in the 80s, 1980s, that Hazir Imam had given farman to the Jamaat that during your lifetime, you will change your profession at least 3 to 4 times. That is the Imam. He warns you well ahead. Whereas people today are all, perplexed and completely bewildered what is happening. I don't think the Jamaat is in that position because of our living Nur Imam.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah. That's a great example of how Imam guides us toward the future. And if we are listening to him carefully, then we can prepare for it. Great. I have a last question, unless anyone else sends a question. This is that you mentioned the esoteric meaning of Surah 5, ayat number 67 in our dua. Can you elaborate a little bit more of the esoteric Batini meaning and the word Rasul, Ya Rasulu Ballik, please?
Yes, yes. Here the Prophet is being asked to deliver a key message, right? What is that? That Ali is the Mawla of the Mu'minin, just as the Prophet was the Mawla of the Mu'minin, according to 33:6. Okay? Now, why is that important? That is important because we believe that the Quran is not only a Zahiri, exoteric, Tanzili revelation. The Quran doesn't only have that which has come from the spiritual world and has been put into parables and allegories and symbols and missiles by the Holy Prophet. We believe that this Tanzil should also have the ta'wil, the inner meaning. So, the Prophet had done his job, he had given the Zahir, the exoteric, but now for the future, because Tawil is something dynamic, it comes in the future. If you want to look it up, no translation will be correct. Surah 7, ayat 52 and 53 tells you that Yawma Yati Tawilahu, when the day the Tawil comes. So Tawil is a process. And so the appointment of Maulana Ali was to ensure that this Quran would not remain only a Zahiri, exoteric, Tanzil Quran. That this Quran would become a dynamic book in which the Tawil would give fresh guidance in every Imam's time according to that time. So if the Tawil is not there, the Tanzil would be completely incomplete. And you all know that there is also an ayat in Surah 5, it's in a very strange place. It's in the same place as all the forbidden foods are mentioned, like blood and carrion. This day have I completed your religion for you and called it Islam. The Shia say that this completion, especially the Ismailis who say that this completion of religion was that Tanzil and Ta'wil came together. They became complete. And so yes, in the Surah 5, ayat 67, there is this reference that without the Ta'wil, the Tanzil would be incomplete. And for this you should see Surah 25, ayat 30, in which the Prophet complains. And that again, the translation is quite dodgy. In this ayat, the Prophet says, Ya Rabbi, inni qawmi, ittakhazu hazal Quran majura. Oh Allah, indeed, my community is holding on to this Quran as a useless thing. Why would the Quran be useless? If it doesn't have ta'wil. That's the Ismaili perspective. For us, the Quran is just as fresh because of the Imam's ta'wil. And that is where our preamble of the Constitution should be read by the Jamaat and you should know it by heart, right? That the Prophet appointed continue the ta'wil and the talim of the final message of Allah, the Quran.
Okay, so after you started with the 567, and I think you have covered everything that listener was asking, but he added one more line to his question. So yes. In the historical sense, we understand that 567 is talking about the time 1400 years ago. But if Quran is the book of guidance today, how do we understand this ayat when we read? Is there something that we should be revealing? I don't know if this is the question. I'll let you make out the question, please.
I really don't, the question is not that clear to me, but I will try and answer it in any case. Whatever is in the Quran now, is in favor of the Ismaili way of thinking. Because we have the Imam and we have the Ta'wil. That's why. And this prayer of the Prophet, Surah 25, Ayah 30, try and read it first and try to understand which bit of the community is the Prophet complaining to God about. Right? So, whatever is in the Quran is all in favor of the way we Ismailis think and act because of the Imam's blessing that he gives us the dynamic meaning which is according to our time. For instance, the Quran has, in the smaller surahs, I don't remember the surah, the Quran says that the greatest reward will be earned by people who free slaves. And in one discussion many, many years ago with the other Muslims, I asked this question. I said, how would you interpret this ayat about freeing a slave when slavery is no more as common as it used to be in the time of the Prophet? And they couldn't answer. And then I gave our point of view. I said, our Imam, who is the direct descendant of the Prophet, he interprets this as there is the slavery of poverty, there is a slavery of ignorance, there is a slavery of ill health, there is a slavery of homelessness, there is a slavery of many, many kinds. And our Imam, through his AKDN and other institutions, is bringing people the freedom to have education, to have good health, to have housing, and to stand on their own feet and live as dignified human beings. So when we contribute to Imam's institutions, we are helping to free people from these different types of slaveries.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah. I believe we have the answer more than he had asked. So if there is no more question, then we will stop here. And we thank you once again for giving us all this time. And you have done it many, many times. And we hope you will come back and join us soon and give us more lectures. If we do receive some more comments or question, I will definitely will forward it to you. I do wanted to thank our two young men who has been sharing every single reference that you have been given, whichever they had available, which is almost 99%. We thank you, those two young men, for doing that. Thank you, Rashid Sahaba, once again for your time, and thank you everybody for joining us this Sunday morning. Yali Madad. Yali Madad.
Thank you. Perhaps the two young men could share whatever they did find with me as well. So for future, I will have such things at my beck and call. Yeah. Thank you so much, and really good luck to all of you. This is a time of knowledge, right? This era in which we are living, this period, is a time of knowledge seeking. It's not only a knowledge society outside. This is also a knowledge society within us. So we should really spend more and more time on reading and discussion and research. So thank you all for your wonderful attention, and I hope that whatever I have been able to say has given you some food for thought and reflection, and I'll be happy if any of you share that. Thank you. Yali Madad.
Thank you. Yali Madad. Yali Madad.